My name is Kiki Hooten. I'm coming from Durango, Colorado. I run the Center for Innovation for Fort Lewis College there. And we are really excited to be hosting the Toolbox track. And today, right now, we have the Rural Entrepreneurial Policy Coalition discussion panel. So I'll let all the panelists kind of introduce themselves and take it away from here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. A couple of quick things. One, we know that this session runs tight with the start of the pitch series across the way. So we will finish early if we can. If you need to leave early because you like to be someone who is early or very much on time, we won't be offended, or we'll all be there just a few minutes late, and we will also be fine. So there you have it. And we'll go together in force. So thank you for being here for this session. The 4 people with us here today, this is the first time we've all met in person after a year of Zoom when we started this work. So this is an interesting moment for all of us, so thank you for being here. Quick intro of myself. I'm Delaney Keating, the Executive Director of Startup Colorado. Startup Colorado is an outreach program from the CU School of Law, which sounds a little obscure, but Phil Weiser, our Attorney General, has a penchant and passion for entrepreneurship, and so in 2011, he started this organization. We are now dedicated to rural entrepreneurship since about 2016, and our staff is entirely located remote and rural around the state, so none of us actually live in Boulder. I've actually only been to the mothership like 6 times since I took this job. So we're a unique team, and just so you know who we are, if you're interested in the work that's happening to connect entrepreneurs like this, like events like West Slope Startup Week, the work we do helps create this connection and inspiration and support 365 days a year. So certainly find us while we're here. Taylor Grande's over there in the black and white stripes. She's on our team. She's our ecosystem and partnerships director. So find us or find us at startupcolorado.org, but just know that we're here for you all year long. And a little bit before we go into intros, I'm going to keep these guys mysterious for a minute longer, because look at them. It's like a band of misfits. So a little bit why we're here today. We're here, of course, to talk about policy. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Why is it important for entrepreneurs? How do you get involved as an entrepreneur when you probably feel like you have no time to get involved in such things? And so these guys will be talking about their experience and how they're doing so. But also it's important to talk about what is policy and why is it important to small business. I think in the last year, we've all learned a bit more about why policy is important, especially from the business side. And so it became a bit of an accelerant in our eyes and ears on policy. But it's always happening quietly. It's like the underbelly and the infrastructure for the foundation for business. And so just like we have all the support network and all the foundation from your friends and your family to your mentors and your coaches and your lenders and your funders and all those things important to the foundation of your success, policy is also right there with you, underneath your feet all the time. It's the rules, the regulations, it's the tax incentives, it's the taxes. It's also all the programs that roll out at the state, different things. And I think in lots of ways we see where policy can benefit us, but we also see where it misses the mark. And that's where it became interesting for this group here today and for us at Startup Colorado. So we began to dig into looking at the work, and some interesting data has come out in the last many years. One key piece that really kind of puts a fire in the bellies of this group here is really key in our face delineators that show us how policy might be missing the mark. Data that comes out of the census that says 89% of all small businesses are 20 employees or less. 80% of that 89% are 10 employees or less. And the majority of policy that we create for small business factors small business at 500 employees or less. So we can see how we might have some discrepancies in the way that we're even crafting and drafting policy out the gate without awareness of the data that's right before our eyes. And why we might call those companies micro businesses at 10 or 20 employees. It's not fair. Those are our actual small businesses. That's the meat of this country. Just like if you listen to the keynote on Monday, and the keynote would have said, entrepreneurship is declining. If you listen to Seth Levine and Elizabeth McBride, who just released their book, The New Builders, entrepreneurship is declining in this country. So if we're honest about our data, we could look at where might we start thinking about policy in order to craft better policy, better taxes, tax incentives and programs, regulations, the whole kit and caboodle, to create a better foundation. This, of course, is an interesting thing for Startup Colorado because, boy, if we're thinking about helping businesses at their first 10 and first 20 employees, those are huge milestones. And that's a better foundation for a startup, for sure. So you can see why I'm very passionate about this topic. And that is where this group comes together. We all met because this is the first cohort who participated in the 2020 Pilot Entrepreneurial Policy Academy that we built in collaboration with the Telluride Foundation and Silicon Flatirons at the CU School of Law. So this team met online and went through a 2-day policy academy and has now spent time together over the last year continuing to chart how do we set the table for policy, and how do we get rural entrepreneurs better seats at the table, especially at the state level, to start to have those conversations and to make sure that we're building better two-way communication channels back and forth. So it's a very exciting moment. One last bit about where we are in this work is that the applications for this year's Policy Academy are open until Monday at 5. So if you're interested in applying for that, you can sign up on a sheet over at that table, and I will email you the application tonight. But that kicks off August 3rd and 4th. The Policy Academy is dedicated to rural entrepreneurs. So we'll be building another cohort, and then as you learn about these guys, you can consider if you want to join their club, because they're a club now. The name is TBD, but currently this is the Colorado Rural Entrepreneurial Policy Coalition, and so we're not committed to that name. We're still figuring it out, and we couldn't come up with it by today, so just know it's TBD. Rural Policy Coalition for short, otherwise you'll get to know them here over this next bit of time. So let's kick it off with some intros. Who are these mysterious folks? First off, let's start with you, Miss Emily. Let's pass it down to Emily.
All right, great. So my name is Emily Heisel. I am the president of Copper Key Tiny Homes out of Rifle, and we are working to build a pilot tiny home community in Rifle and hopefully grow beyond that, but really trying to address the affordable housing crisis from the local level. My husband and I have lived there for a long time, and we really want to make an impact on that community. And we want to start with tiny homes, but we know it'll grow way beyond that and affect lives and the workers and everybody in very interesting ways as we move forward.
Go for it. Take it.
Okay, I'm Brian Wax. I'm CEO of My Sales Butler, which is a freelancer marketing co-op, and a Quicker Stuff, which is a bike rack manufacturer right here in Grand Junction. No, I am not Elon Musk, and yes, it's stressful being a CEO of two companies. Didn't want to do it on purpose. For me, this is a culmination of trying to give back after 25 years in Vail and being very naive and hedonistic in my life, and wondering why I was having the success I had and why my friends in my community were not having successes like me. I got in my Subaru with my bike and my teleskis, and I traveled the West for, I think it was 4 months. And because Grand Junction was kind of a backyard because of Moab and Fruta and the river, I decided to talk to leaders here. From what I heard, I was told by people in Vail, don't go there, the place is broken. When I talked to the leaders here, I found it quite opposite. I found amazing president at a university, the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, and I decided I wanted to be a member of that team to help with economic diversity. So that's my little spiel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Olson. I'm the founder of GROWL Agency. I moved our company here from Denver about 4 years ago, and it's been fantastic. So I think of policy. I've learned a lot when I was in the Front Range. It wasn't so much, policy wasn't so much a thing for my company, because I think you're living in that Front Range bubble, and I like to think that there's always two Colorados, if anybody agrees with that. You have the Front Range Colorado, and then basically you have everywhere else. And being part of like economic development and Startup Colorado and going to these different communities, Trinidad for one, we have some good friends down there and how they're growing that. Out in the Eastern Plains, of course, Hugo, Colorado, and then all the way, of course, here, and then we have Southwestern Colorado. And I think it's just an amazing disparity between Front Range, and we'll call it rural Colorado, so I like to think of this policy as about having a rural voice, because I think politicians, we need to help them understand what's happening everywhere else on the other Colorado. And I think that's what I've learned from this about how do we do that, how do you get involved, and how do we kind of move that ball forward maybe year over year. So like Delaney said, I would get involved at least at some level to understand how you can be part of policy change.
Hey, my name is Andrew Beckler. I'm the owner and founder of Grass Sticks. We make bamboo ski poles and paddles and steamboat springs. Everything we do is made by hand, with the exception of growing the bamboo and molding our own plastics. We do import that. Grass Sticks started in my kitchen in 2014 in Steamboat, and the biggest challenge we have right now is trying to keep it in Steamboat as we grow. And that's why I want to get involved with policy, and I am getting involved with policy. A lot has changed in Steamboat since 2014. It's become largely unaffordable, especially if you're looking to buy a home there. Myself, my employees, it just can't be done. So that's one of the hurdles of trying to keep it there. But thoughtfully and carefully crafted policy with rural entrepreneurs in mind can really help eliminate a lot of those roadblocks. Not only is it important selfishly for me, for my employees, because we want to go skiing and live in that ski town. We work at a ski company. It kind of seems like it makes sense. But it's also really important for the town itself. It can lose its character if the town starts to lose some of its businesses. We just had Smartwool move away recently. That was about 100 top-paying jobs. And you see a lot of other companies, having the same struggles that I am too, and trying to keep their business there. So here I am trying to get involved and trying to make change, both selfishly so I can stay there and so we can see a diverse community.
So you can see why, to some extent, and this is an important aspect of why I think entrepreneurs are so important in policy, especially rural ones. I think rural entrepreneurs have a unique understanding of their place in economy and their impact inside of it, juxtaposed to urban. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist for urban, but the commitment to place and community and jobs and everything, and understanding how everything impacts you and your business is heightened because you don't have the mass and the density and the space. So it's very interesting. Also very important from this group and what you'll hear today, and why I really get behind them and champion them, is entrepreneurs are best at the table for policy because they can speak their truth. They are the end user in many ways, especially with small business policy that we are trying to serve. And they are not, like elected officials, worried about public backlash or the next election. So always put the mic to an entrepreneur first. They have more to lose, right? And more to win, quite frankly. So that's why I love these people. You'll love them too. So tell us more, Greg. Tell us about why this is important for rural.
I think we can call it like filterless policy after that. So,
There we go.
Because we really don't have a filter. We're not trying to oppress anybody, nor are we trying to get votes, I think. There was a study, and maybe I'll get this wrong, but it was like 85% of Colorado's economic activity came from 16 of our 64 counties. So, and this study was a few years ago, probably very similar, and I think that disparity gap in economic, it was from lack of economic investment into these other rural communities. Things like who lives in a place that, or knows people that don't have really great broadband? I mean, yeah, or it goes up and down, right? Who lives in a place that people can't find housing? I mean, it's real everywhere, but in rural Colorado, it's a big deal, and we were just talking about that. Healthcare. jobs. I mean, these are things that are really important to me as running GROWL and moving here. It's harder and harder, not even taking the past year, which I don't even want to call it. We don't want to talk about that. But it's now challenging, and it was, to find people because of the healthcare costs. It can be cost of housing. And I think so we need a stronger policy. We need stronger investments in our community. And so that, to me, is one of the number one reasons I'm actively involved in learning more about policy and getting involved.
I think.
Well, did you want to talk more about why this is important to rural?
I'm just going to piggyback on what Greg said. It's underrepresented, period. All the dollars on the Front Range on the I-25 corridor. And they talk about transportation problems there and the money goes there. Well, we have transportation problems here too. And, so all these different things that you talk about, they're looking at their density and their voter base. Well, we have found out for the last 2 elections that there's a pretty significant voter base outside of the Front Range. I think it's 50%. So if that's the case, maybe you should listen. And at the same time, I heard today, I'm not going to name names, or yesterday, that somebody at OEdit, Somebody at OEdit said, what's wrong with you? There's plenty of capital out there. Okay, now here's the economic development institution that this is Startup Colorado is out of, that thinks there's plenty of capital out there. Really? There's plenty of capital out there for 10x type returns. That's it. So the fact that they are not listening, you need jerks like me to scream in your face and say, you better start listening because you're out. And that's what's happening in these last 2 elections is you're out unless you start listening.
Which is a great segue because we know what's important to you now. So everybody up here has something that's, I'm a mess in this chair, I'm knocking things off. Everybody up here has something that's important to them, and that varies by the entrepreneur, right? It depends on their business, their location, what's their biggest pain point. Fun fact about these companies are all inside of that 20 or less employees right now. And all of them have had big milestones this last year. 2 grew at least 100% year over last in the middle of the pandemic. So here's the low-hanging fruit. Here are the people hungry and ready and growing right now and addressing all these challenges. And we know, too, that an ounce of impact in rural ripples deeper and wider than an ounce of impact in an urban setting. Because that one job, that one house, because of the roles that we all play and the dynamism that happens in a small town in a different way. And that's what's really interesting about Emily and the work she's doing, because it is addressing that pain point. So Emily, tell us a little bit about, of course, your policy topic, some of your challenges and how you got here.
Okay. Yeah, I think rural can be very...
Don't be afraid.
Okay. There's a lot of opportunity when you start small. And rural versus urban, you can make a really big impact. And for me, I'm trying to build this community. I'm starting at the county and the city level, and then we have to bring in policy because the code doesn't account for tiny homes. So we are at an uphill battle. And there are people working at the national level, but that could take forever. I don't know. I can't count on that to happen. So if I can start at the city and the county level, then I found that we can then replicate that maybe at the state and start the momentum by starting rural.
Emily, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How many of that is not in my town? Because I live in Fruta, or we hear this in other communities where I want affordable housing, I want tiny home, I love the idea, but I don't want it across the street from where I live. And I hear this a lot now, not in my town.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in Garfield County, and up valley in the more affluent part of Garfield County, there was a tiny home development that got struck down about 2 years ago. So it was just because the people around that didn't want the development. So that's absolutely part of
it's beyond policy. It's
with affordable housing.
I know.
Yeah.
So it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And Delaney, I forgot what you.
No, just sort of what some of your challenges have been, because you're so embedded. Your traction and momentum forward is embedded in policy change.
Yeah. So a big part of our struggle is kind of what Brian here was talking about with capital. Everybody says there's capital out there. Boy, is it hard to get. We don't fit in any box being tiny homes. We have to get the different zoning. We have to have the right people that want to try something different to live. And so it's going to take a leap of faith. And we've been trying different avenues, investors and government entities and grants and all sorts of stuff. And I can share with you one issue of policy that has just, to me, struck the core of the issue and why this is so important. Our local House rep, who is fantastic, helped put through an affordable housing bill a couple years ago and was happy to share it with me and tell me all about it. So I went to look into that and was talking with DOLA, and everything about our project hit the mark. Like, we're diversifying housing, we're doing something different, we're adding to the housing stock, our rents would be super low in comparison, but they have an income cap requirement. So anybody that would live with us would have to qualify at a certain level. Now, our company, we are targeting two specific groups. One is teachers and one is seniors. The maximum amount anybody that lived with us could make was about $35,000. The first year teacher, like just straight out of college, makes $36,000. So in order to take the grant to launch our product to help the whole community, we would have to say no to the people that we are trying to serve. And so that, I get like mad every time I tell that story, because it absolutely says why I'm here and why making those policy changes matters. And until you see those examples, it's hard to just grasp. Like, affordable housing, it sounds great, we all want it, but when that happens, you know we need to change it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, tell us a little bit about what policy is important to you from GROWL, because you're growing a lot right now.
Yeah, thank you. So who here thinks healthcare is affordable? Leave your hand up, everybody. You in the back? No? Okay, no, you think? No, oh, sorry, I have my glasses on. Your hand was down. It is horrible, isn't it? So now you have a business and you want to give healthcare to people. So the policies around healthcare, it's mind-numbing. And Brian and I might argue a little bit, but I argue the fact that rural policy, there's a House bill, it was 1232, got passed. It really pissed me off. I spent a lot of time talking to Delta, rural hospitals. Yes, big front range hospitals are having record profits. Those are the stories that are hitting, right? Again, the two Colorados, that's what's struggling. So these doctors, hospitals, clinics that are supporting elderly patients, low income patients, they're the ones that are getting screwed over by these types of bills that are front range driven. Emily and I get passionate. I'll swear more than her. She's nicer. That's a frustrating part. You give back data, you go get written things saying, hey, tell us why this hospital. It's because of these bills are kind of detrimental. And so, again, the top line, people get excited like, oh, we can reduce healthcare because these hospitals have record profits. Agreed. But not the hospitals in rural Colorado. They do not have record profits, and that is proven. So these are the things that get me excited, because we want to supply health care insurance to our employees, and that's one of our second costs, highest cost, underneath a payroll. And so as that grows, but we still have to keep being creative with it. So anyways, what do you think I care about? Anybody? Anyways, so.
Healthcare.
And baseball, but that's different, okay? So, yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, everybody comes to the table with, something that you already had a fire in your belly around policy and a pain point or a challenge that was directly inhibiting you or prohibiting your growth forward. And we've spent a year together from the academy to now, and so it'd be great just to talk a little bit about what have you guys learned this last year? Where do you feel more clear or more powerful? We know there's still a lot of mud in the water. We're getting better at this every day together, because carving ways to advocate for policy as busy entrepreneurs, those are big discussions we have often, is how do we do this in a way that's sustainable for them? because their cycles ebb and flow, and how much time do they actually have to commit. So I would just love to hear, let's start with you, Andrew, what have you learned this last year? What's your biggest takeaway?
I think one of the biggest surprises is how many players go into crafting this policy, including ourselves and the organizations that we've tried to team up with, and then all the way to the politicians who are actually making things happen, and the huge teams that they have and the input they're gathering from everybody. And we're just trying to be a small little cog in that to try and push a little bit of policy on our end and our voice and get that through. So it's almost daunting in a way to see all that, to see how small we are in comparison to the whole game, but it's been very eye-opening and empowering as well to start to play a role in that.
Cool.
I agree with that. It is very much a slow process that you have to be patient. I'm not a very patient person, so it's a challenge, but.
You seem very patient on the outside, by the way. You do, especially when you're lifting beer and bringing it into the office.
That helps the patience.
Outside of this group, I went on a lobbying trip. Wow. So one of the lobbyists told me in our session, what is the first thing you do as a politician when you get into office? Come on, let's have some guesses here. What's the first thing you do when you get into office? Lie. Ooh. Huh? Right.
That was the real answer.
Fundraise. You start raising money for your next campaign, okay? So if that's the case, you have to hit these people where the dollars are, right? I was actually talking to Robin outside after her talk. I don't know if you listened to her talk, her experience with Washington and such. For me, the aspect that there needs to be voices, I'm impatient. I've been asked to run for government multiple times, and I always say no. I don't have the patience for the process. You have to have patience, and I'm going to go out and build a company and push policy that way. That's just my background. So I would say that what I've learned is you have to speak up, and you have to get involved, because the only way you're going to be listened to is if you're talking and you're in the room.
Is it like the squeaky wheel?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it is the politically correct squeaky wheel, which I will admit that I am not the best at politically correct, because I just spew sometimes. Guilty.
But you have been pretty active in the years you've been out here.
Yeah.
Of like being a squeaky wheel.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm a co-founder of this. I helped get this co-working space in this building done. It's just my nature. My nature is shut up, let's just do it. There's a good team here. Sometimes my mouth is such that I get credit for things that we did as a team. And so I get undue credit for stuff like that. But it's just, let's just get it done. Now, I know in policy is driven by business and innovations in business and changes in the economy and stuff like that. So if that's the case, I feel like that's more my role, is to stay in my lane.
Awesome.
I would say, so I'm the type of person that I want to find what's broken and fix it. And I want to find the easiest piece to fix first and then build from that. What I've learned is that you can't really assume that there will be a quick win. So patience, I think, has been mentioned multiple times, so I will definitely go with that.
So we're hearing all the exact same things in Durango, and I have specific questions for each of you around your interests, but what would your advice be for someone trying to engage a small business community and get them involved, because there's such a distrust in the process and being so far away? Like, businesses hear all this and know it and still don't feel inclined to act. Like, what do you think would be helpful for a business owner to know on how to get involved?
So as somebody who's worked all over the world, this is the least worst system on the planet, in my opinion. They're all bad systems because humans are involved. But the key is humans have to get involved. And it takes time. And with my lack of patience, guilty, I know nothing's going to happen overnight. So you have organizations like Startup Colorado. You have advocates, right there in your town.
Well, and this is a great segue into what you guys are working on right now. To your point, it's, how do you do it at the local level, but how do we create bridges that do it? Because it depends what level of policy you're looking at the state level, at the county level, at the local level, and then there's, of course, the federal level. By nature of this group, a lot of our emphasis has been at the state level. But Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're working on right now, what you guys are carving? Because there's a couple of paths. Everything's an experiment, right? And that's one of the things that's cool is we know entrepreneurs are risk takers and experimenters. And what we need to start doing is creating pattern sets to allow the government to do the same.
Yeah, so to almost answer your question, like, you need groups. Entrepreneurs don't have the time or the money, same thing, to make this happen on their own. So if you can help create some coalition, some local coalition, which we're doing in Steamboat this week, meeting with all the other outdoor companies there to just try and make something happen. We have no agenda next week, but we're going to get together. We're going to have a couple beers and see what we can do and have a conversation. So as far as what we're doing right now, to kind of segue from the fact that we don't have any time or money or anything like that, we're all running our own businesses. It's really hard to try and make some of this stuff happen. So we are working with Good Business Colorado, which is a other coalition of business leaders and owners, to act as a pipeline and just for us to have a kind of seat at the table. Not only can we tell them what we want and our policy asks, but they can help give us advice and we can kind of work together in that regard. Their main goals are to promote a prosperous economy, equitable communities, and a sustainable environment, which clearly overlaps with everything that we're trying to do as promoting our small businesses. That's creating equitable communities, higher pays, more jobs in these small rural towns. We're working with them right now, so we're pretty excited to see what's going to happen. We did just start that conversation, but we will have a seat at the table. They'll be able to give us advice on how to advance our agenda, and we hope that we can do the same for them and give them advice of the rural business owners that we are. That's one of the big things we're working on, and the second one is a little more direct. Good Business Colorado, and they're located out of the Front Range.
Yeah, Deborah's
I know Front Range.
headquartered out of Wheat Ridge.
I think it's
they're all Front
Denver.
Range. And most of these organizations like this were so excited that a group like this was forming because some of the policy organizations like Good Business Colorado or different groups, they're housed out of the Front Range. They have small staffs and budgets too, so those people doing more direct advocacy work with the legislature need help getting more threads to the rural environment.
Yeah, which is really the way it can go both ways. Like we want a voice for it, but they also need the voice from us in order to have that input. So likewise in Durango, if you can have that coalition be put together, reach out to someone like Good Business Colorado that already knows how to push for policy and do things like that, that can be really helpful. Because I don't know where to start. I just make bamboo ski poles. I don't know anything about policy, so but we're learning. So again, if you haven't figured out yet, we really believe that rural entrepreneurs are key to crafting policy that is going to, again, turn around and help those rural entrepreneurs and the small businesses. We've kind of realized that we don't have much of a voice in creating these policy and making these decisions and implementing a lot of the programs that are already out there to help support small businesses. A lot of these programs that are out there, they're great, they look good on paper, but they really tend to miss the mark when they're implemented, or small businesses may not even know about them. And one of the bigger issues is that if these policies are crafted down in the Front Range, they're making sweeping generalizations about all the different types of rural communities that are out there. We've got agriculture, tourism, energy, which is transitioning from oil into possibly more renewables right now, or you have towns that are leaving from oil and mining and need to kind of find their new way. Each of these different communities has their own needs, their own goals, and their own challenges. So what we think we need to do is require seats on these state boards with rural entrepreneurs to take those places. Currently, we are in the process of identifying which boards are going to be most effective, because there's about 200 of them out there, I believe.
There's a lot.
So we're going to pick a handful, which ones are going to be most effective in helping us. And then assign a number of seats on those boards that are going to be reserved for rural entrepreneurs and these small business owners. Why do we need this? It's because these small business owners are the job creators. There's a lot of bigger businesses out there, but statistics show that their kind of job levels stay steady over time. They don't really increase too much. Whereas the small businesses, you know, I started out with one and now I'm at 4 full time, quickly expanding. We're the ones that actually grow and create jobs instead of just staying at a steady level. We also offer a diverse perspective understanding of these local economies and through all those different types of economies, like I mentioned before. And we're committed to these communities as well. We live here in town. So we want to see our towns grow. We want to see them develop. We want to see that economic growth in our homes, as opposed to some bigger businesses, which usually they don't live there. They may not live in state. They may not live in the country. So they're siphoning off those profits out of these small towns, out of state, out of country. Not only profits that go to be spent again in the town or be spent on higher wages, but taxes as well. You see that gets siphoned away. So it is really important to make sure we're keeping that all in the communities where we live. So again, it's a work in progress, just as it is working with Good Business Colorado, but we're really looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah. There's also a sign-up sheet. They're really fancy. They're Sharpies on white paper over there. If you want to give us your name and email, we'll give you updates as this group continues to form and where we're having success, because there may be opportunities to join in the future.
Sounds like with all those councils, you might need lots of seats. Not
Yes.
Participating at this level, but also people who are willing to go and attend those things, be present.
Yes. Yeah, if there ends up with seats designated on state boards for rural entrepreneurs, the rural entrepreneurs have to show up for sure, and they have to be. And so that's a key part. And certainly, I'm just thinking as we're all sitting here, I'm like, I don't know how Phil Weiser feels about all this, but we've come full circle since the Attorney General started Startup Colorado, and now, now look at what's happening. So his office has been very helpful in looking at this state board process as well.
And to Andrew's point, too, these are sexy numbers for politicians. 400% growth. I'm at 1,200% growth in 1 year. That's the numbers they want. Yeah. So that helps with their reelection campaigns and how to push forward.
Yeah. It also looks at the urban-rural divide, right? And so we're talking about long-standing two-way communications and relationships that have always struggled, right? And so this is a really interesting way to carry it forward. Go ahead, Greg. I see you teeing up.
I'm passing.
Oh, you're passing, but now you've got it. All eyes on you.
No, I want to answer the how do you get involved.
Yes.
I don't know Durango, but living in Fruita, and also local chambers have government affairs committees where you can remote testify. I think it's fantastic. I've learned a lot. To get involved with that. A lot of people forget the local chamber, but you can ask, do we have a government affairs committee? That is an awesome place to get involved locally. They're involved from a local level, business level, and I'm on those committees. And that's where I learn what's happening, and they'll have their representatives on phones with you. You get to talk to the senators or their aides. Really, that's who we're talking to sometimes, is a level up. Delaney's kind of taught us that. I think we'll talk to their aides. If you know who they are, then they're the ones that take your letters, your emails, and then kind of move it up the ladder. It seems there's a path that we don't always understand as small business. Right. Like Andrew said, it's hard when you're small, right? You don't know the path or you don't have the time. So I think that's good. There was startusupnow.org. That was a real great organization I learned about. I would go on that website and take a look. They're really engaged in entrepreneur and small business in rural communities. It's more of a national effort. We met them, and I thought that was a great organization as well. So just a couple points that I've learned moving forward. So.
And to follow up, I know that, what was the other? Oh, Good Business.
Good Business Colorado.
Will
Yep.
also help fund if businesses want to go and testify at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely get involved in Good Business Colorado. Even they learn also a word of advice is agree to disagree. Be patient and agree to disagree. People like Brian and I, we have sometimes louder voices and we argue, but doesn't mean we disagree. It's just we want to be heard. And it's sometimes like working with Deborah, she'll help you understand why it's packaged up a certain way as a bill and why we have to present it this way. And a lot of times I'm like, no, it's a no, 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 no. And then she's like, take a breath, Greg. She's like a therapist. She's like a policy therapist. That's Deborah. Deborah's a policy therapist. And because a lot of times you're like, this makes no sense. We're getting screwed. And she's like, well, let me go through it with you, okay? Sit down. So I think those are things. Just be patient and, take a breath and be willing to learn, I guess.
Well, and there's startusup.now.org, so there are a couple of national organizations that have started to circle the wagons around policy in the country. One's the Kauffman Foundation, they're Start Us Up Now. They're doing a lot of work at the federal level. There's also Right to Start. So this is all happening in tandem with a bigger sweeping goal of things like getting small business policy in the top talking points for the federal elections along party lines. So it's a pretty interesting time. There's also, when you hear the things they're talking about, there's different roads for everybody. Some people will be interested and ready and want to go testify to the legislature. Other people, that would be the last thing they ever wanted to do in their lives. So there's letter writing, there's participating in Good Business Colorado. We've learned sometimes you can get the ability to provide comments on draft documents once you get plugged in on things like that as well. So what else would you say to founders to get involved? Oh, sorry. We had a hand.
I just wanted to ask a question about, I'm not putting anyone on the spot or anything. I just wondered if you have thought about or how you might go about engaging on the eastern part of Colorado, because I know you mentioned there's 2 Colorados, but I'm from the eastern part of Colorado, and I would argue say there's 3 Colorados.
That's a fair statement. Yeah.
It's not the western.
No, you're right. There
It's
is
just
3.
Not, and I think some of the communities on the western slope have similar issues, like the more agriculture-related communities, but my family's all several generations back from the Morgan County area. It's all beef, it's the corn issues, and the culture is just, it's way more Midwestern, very different there. And so I'm just curious, how are you thinking about how those people, are they engaged? My mom still owns tons of property on the other side of the state, and it's just weird issues, and they're very different. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor Grande from our team here always says, this is a great one, she says, when you've been to one rural town, you've been to one rural town. They're all different, their challenges are different. And that is a key thing we've talked about as well, is that policies not only drafted largely from the urban corridor, small business policy, 500 employees or less. If I had a sticker campaign, it would be, say, 20 employees or less, and it would be on the laptop or tattooed on the forehead of every politician in DC. This is ridiculous, right? That's a huge discrepancy. So you look at things like that, you look at the difference between urban and rural, and then you look at rural. And rural policy is drafted as one bucket for rural. Yeah. And like Andrew said, there's ag, there's energy transition, there's resort tourism-based rural, there's lots of nuance in this. And so that's something that is a big tangle, but it's looking at how do policies get drafted with more flexibility in a way that allows that community to use that policy based on who they are and what their challenges are.
Well, and I would say that one of the things that might be interesting to think about as this moves forward is what are the rural issues that everyone's having? Where is the Front Range just definitely different from rural, and the North is totally different from each other? Because I think some of the things you're talking about is that the Front Range is just operating in this vacuum that is completely unaware of just rural.
One, I'm going to say, look at Startup Colorado. They have a great system portal that you can join, meet other people with similar opportunities, let's say, that you can get involved with, and I think I think that's one way to start looking at that. And you'll find there's a resonant a thread that's going through Eastern Colorado for support.
I think they have a separate cohort too. I forget what county, but for the Eastern Plains. So that could be huge to get involved with as well. Honestly, like we were saying before in Durango, how do we get people involved? We don't have time to get involved directly, so look for that group, and use them as your pipeline. So.
Yeah. But right now, the easiest way to start getting involved is to apply for the academy. So again, that closes Monday at 5. That's going to give you a quick, strapped way into, push it out in Durango, other places. And we do, that Rural Academy, the Rural Policy Academy, is for entrepreneurs across the state. So that does cover the East. It's very different territory to navigate. So absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that because of my involvement in this, I was invited to the Biden administration small business Zoom call. It was, staff level people. So here, little old Brian Wax in Grand Junction, Colorado, because of Startup Colorado, because of this coalition, somehow, I don't remember how I was invited, but I was on the phone call talking about how can we change extra small business policy and stuff like that. So in this small way, I was able to get out some of this perspective that we've had to that audience in the new administration. So that was amazing to me that they were listening to us.
Yeah, doors will open, I think, is what this allows other doors to open that you never know there was a door there. So I think that's why I would say get involved, because you don't even know that door is there. You're like, no one's listening.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the state level, but a lot of these he's actually at local government level. I'm getting a lot, I'm nodding, right? And part of the issue with the local communities is they're not staffed. And bad policy tends to propagate, quite frankly, between neighbors. Because, they say, well, this county does that, so we're going to do that too. And it's not easy to develop good policy at the local government level either. I think, you probably have direct experience of that. But something the state could do at DOLA is they could do the legwork to develop good policies that communities could then adopt.
Yeah, the state can certainly lead by example, and we see it, to your point, and this is a good point, that we talk about government's willingness to take risks, and so that will often happen. So if another county has taken on some sort of regulatory change to allow for tiny home development, then another county's like, well, they took that risk, so now it suddenly feels a little safer, right? So it's totally, yes, economic development by way of keeping up with the Joneses. Yes, for sure, but it's real, and it is giving that permission, but it helps to have kind of a model. Do you have anything to add to that, Emily, given your... No, that's okay. Come on, Emily.
When they see you coming, do they close the door? They put a close sign on?
No, they're good. I've found just in my own bubble, it's been very helpful to attend the planning and zoning meetings before I planned on attending them for our own business, just to kind of learn the ins and outs and who seems to be driving the meetings and what they're looking for. And I agree, good policy or bad can spread. So if you can bring the legwork and if you can bring the knowledge, that will help tremendously. Like we've reached out, and we're members of the Tiny Home Industry Association, and the president there has been writing policy mainly in California. But he's shared that with us, and we've shared that with the county, and they are trying to use the good parts of that to go forward. So, patience. If you bring the expertise, that'll help the people that don't have the expertise in that section.
Good question.
Yeah.
Not an easy answer. None of this has easy answers. That's the hard part for me, is we're entrepreneurs and we like to solve problems and move forward. Plus I'm a Libra, so I like to fix things. I like to fix it now, right? And it's like, so that does not work well for me in policy. I think they should look at your horoscope and be like, you're good. No, what are you? An Aries? Yeah, you can come over. Libras, go over here. Because it is tough, right? I'm going to tell you. So, all right, we gotta wind this up.
Yep. One last question? We got one.
One question, the idea that comes to my head is just a policy on piloting. So whether it's affordable housing or some small, to basically give you a framework to do something more experimental.
Yeah.
I don't know how you policy something that's experimental.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I mean, maybe if it's some mechanism for, I'm an architect, so I'm thinking for you, like we talk about either prescriptive or performance requirements. So, you know, giving some kind of flexibility to say, hey, listen, this is.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure. Yeah, and I think about it in Emily's case, right? Couldn't access a grant over $1,000 because of a wage cap of $35,000 when the salaries for her people she wanted to serve was at $36,000. That's not a lot of money to have lost that opportunity. And so it's like having even a sort of a pipeline or a pathway for an entrepreneur to appeal to that and say, but based on my local data, this is where I sit, and for there to be that flexibility to at least let her pilot. Go ahead.
Actually, I think Wheaton or Wheatridge or one of those is piloting an AED program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, just to increase the number of available housing in an area. So that might be something to look at, because that is, I believe it's government funded. So, and it's with Habitat for Humanity and a couple of other organizations that came together.
It also shows the importance of who you vote for. Vote for the person who's going to be willing to take some risks, put themselves out there. So, well, thank you all for joining us. Let's give a big round of applause for these people.